Captain Sarah Chen gripped the command chair as another blast rocked the ship. Red warning lights flashed across the bridge of the Defiant Dawn. The small human vessel shuddered under the attack from 6 massive alien warships that surrounded them like hungry wolves. "Shields down to 30%, Lieutenant Marcus Webb called out from the engineering station. Sweat dripped down his face as he tried to keep the ship's systems running. "I can't hold them much longer, Captain." Sarah looked at the main screen. The enemy ships were huge, each one 3 times the size of her reconnaissance vessel. They had strange, curved hulls that looked like the shells of giant insects. Blue energy beams shot from their weapons, each blast powerful enough to destroy a city block. "Who are they?" asked Corporal Lisa Torres from her position at the weapons console. She was a tough Marine who had fought in many battles, but even she sounded worried. "Zeth Kari Imperial Fleet," Private Jake Morrison answered from the communications station. His young face was pale as he read the incoming signals. "They're demanding our immediate surrender. They say we entered their space without permission." Sarah's jaw tightened. The Defiant Dawn was on a simple mapping mission near the Kepler 442 system. Earth's government had sent them to chart new star systems and look for planets humans could settle on. They had no idea this area belonged to anyone. "Tell them we're peaceful explorers," Sarah ordered. "We didn't know this was their territory. We'll leave immediately." Jake typed quickly on his console, then shook his head. "They're not listening, Captain. They say all humans are primitive invaders. They want us to surrender now or be destroyed." Another blast hit the ship. This time, the lights went out for several seconds before the emergency power kicked in. Sarah could smell smoke from burned circuits. They were running out of time. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures," Lisa said, her voice tight with fear. "They're charging weapons for a killing blow." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. She thought about her crew, good people who trusted her to bring them home safely. She thought about Earth so far away, and the families waiting for their return. Then she opened her eyes and made her choice. "All hands, prepare to be boarded," she announced over the ship's communication system. "Destroy all sensitive data. Make sure they learn nothing about Earth's defenses or our technology." The crew moved quickly. Webb ran to his station and began deleting computer files. Torres grabbed a small hammer and started smashing delicate instruments. Morrison pulled out data chips and threw them into the recycling unit where they would be destroyed. The alien ship stopped firing. One of the massive vessels moved closer to the Defiant Dawn. Strange mechanical arms reached out from its hull and grabbed the human ship like a giant picking up a toy. Sarah felt the artificial gravity shift as they were pulled inside the alien vessel. "Stay calm," Sarah told her crew. "Remember your training. Name, rank, and serial number only. Don't let them see fear." The airlock hissed open. Tall figures in dark armor stepped through. They looked like giant lizards walking on 2 legs. Their scaled skin was dark green and their eyes glowed yellow in the dim light. Each one carried a weapon that hummed with energy. The leader removed his helmet. His reptilian head was covered in small spikes, and when he spoke, Sarah could see rows of sharp teeth. His voice was deep and threatening. "I am Commander Thekvar of the Zeth Kari Imperial Fleet. You humans have committed the crime of entering sacred Zeth Kari space. You will come with us to face judgment." Sarah stepped forward, keeping her back straight and her voice steady. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Force. My crew and I are prisoners of war. We demand to be treated according to galactic law." The alien commander laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. "Galactic law? You primitive mammals know nothing of law. You are insects that crawled out of your dirt planet and think you can fly with the eagles. We are sentient beings with rights," Sarah said firmly. "We were on a peaceful mission." "Peaceful?" Commander Thekvar moved closer to Sarah. He was nearly 7 feet tall, and she had to look up to meet his yellow eyes. "You humans spread across space like a disease. You take what is not yours. You think your weak species can compete with those who have ruled the galaxy for thousands of years." The alien soldiers forced the crew to put on metal restraints around their wrists. The restraints were cold and heavy, designed for beings much larger than humans. Sarah could see her crew trying to stay brave, but she knew they were scared. "Where are you taking us?" Webb asked. To Dominion Prime, Commander Thekvar replied. The capital world of our great empire. King Vashitar the Eternal wishes to see these bold little creatures who dare to enter his domain. As they were led through the alien ship, Sarah studied everything she could. The corridors were wide and tall, built for the large HFY. The walls were covered in what looked like writing, but the symbols were strange and alien. She could hear the deep hum of powerful engines and see the glow of advanced technology. Impressive ship, she said quietly to Webb as they walked. Very advanced, he whispered back. But I noticed their security systems have some gaps. Overconfident, maybe? Sarah nodded slightly. Even as prisoners, her crew was still thinking like soldiers. That gave her hope. They were put in a large holding cell with thick metal bars. The cell was clearly designed for much larger prisoners, so the humans had plenty of room. There were 4 sleeping platforms and a small area with what appeared to be basic facilities. How long until we reach their capital? Torres asked Commander Thekvar. 3 of your days, the alien replied. Enjoy your last moments of life, humans. King Vashitar does not show mercy to those who challenge HFY power. After the aliens left, the crew gathered in the center of their cell. They spoke in low voices, knowing their captors might be listening. What do you think they'll do to us? Morrison asked. He was the youngest member of the crew, barely 22 years old. They want to make an example, Sarah said. Show the galaxy what happens to anyone who opposes them. They don't know much about humans, do they? Torres said with a small smile. Sarah looked at her Marine. Torres was right. These aliens saw humans as weak and primitive. They had no idea what Earth's military was truly capable of. The Defiant Dawn was just a small scout ship with basic weapons. The real Terran Defense Force was something very different. Let them underestimate us, Sarah said quietly. It might be the last mistake they ever make. Webb was examining the cell's walls and bars. Captain, I think I can modify our communicators to send a tight beam message. The HFY scanner found them, but they think they're just simple translators. Can you reach Earth? Sarah asked. Maybe, or at least the fleet command, if Admiral Harrison is still in this sector. Sarah felt a spark of hope. Admiral Rebecca Harrison commanded the Terran Defense Force's Rapid Response Fleet. If anyone could help them, it would be her. Do it, Sarah ordered. But be careful. We don't want them to know what we're really capable of. As the alien ship traveled toward Dominion Prime, the human prisoners began to plan. They looked like defeated captives to their guards, but inside, they were still soldiers. And soldiers never stopped fighting, even when the odds seemed impossible. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humanity. Sometimes the smallest creatures had the sharpest teeth. The great amphitheater of Dominion Prime was the largest building Sarah Chen had ever seen. The massive stone structure could hold over 1 million beings, and today, it was completely full. Aliens of dozens of different species filled the seats, all of them watching as the human prisoners were marched into the center arena. Sarah looked around as they walked. She saw tall, thin creatures with blue skin and 4 arms. There were round, furry beings that looked like giant hamsters. Some aliens floated in the air, while others crawled on multiple legs. But they all had one thing in common. They looked afraid. Why are they all so scared? Morrison whispered. Because they remember when it was them down here, Torres answered quietly. The arena floor was made of polished black stone that reflected the lights above. In the center was a raised platform where 4 metal posts waited. The human prisoners were chained to these posts, facing a massive throne that rose high above them. King Vashitar the Eternal sat on that throne like a giant lizard god. He was even larger than Commander Thekvar, nearly 8 feet tall with dark red scales that seemed to glow in the light. A golden crown sat on his massive head, and his yellow eyes burned with cruel intelligence. People of the galaxy, the king's voice boomed across the amphitheater. Translation devices carried his words in hundreds of languages. Today you witness justice. Today you see what happens to those who dare challenge the eternal power of the HFY Empire. The crowd remained silent. Sarah could feel their fear like a thick blanket over the entire arena. These beings had been conquered by the HFY long ago. They knew what happened to those who resisted. These creatures, King Vashatar pointed a clawed finger at the humans, call themselves humans. They come from a small, worthless planet on the edge of civilized space. Yet they have the nerve to enter our territory without permission. They refuse to bow before our authority. Sarah kept her back straight and her eyes on the king. She would not show weakness, not in front of this monster. The creature that leads them claims to be a captain. The king continued with a laugh that sounded like thunder, as if these primitive mammals could understand military hierarchy, as if they could comprehend the art of war. More laughter came from the king's personal guards, but the crowd remained quiet. Sarah noticed that many of the aliens in the seats were looking at her with something that might have been respect, or maybe hope. King Vashatar stood up from his throne. Even at this distance, his massive size was frightening. Captain Chen, he said her name like it was a joke. You stand accused of invasion, trespassing, and the ultimate crime of refusing to acknowledge Zethkari supremacy. How do you answer? Sarah lifted her chin and spoke in a clear, strong voice that carried across the arena. I answer that we came in peace. We harmed no one. We would have left immediately if asked politely. Instead, you attacked us without warning and captured us illegally. The king's eyes blazed with anger. Illegally? You speak of law? We are the law in this galaxy, human. We have ruled here for 3,000 years while your species was still learning to make fire. Age does not give you the right to murder innocents, Sarah replied. Power does not make you just. A murmur ran through the crowd. Sarah could hear surprise in their voices. No one spoke to King Vashatar like this and lived. You have spirit. I will give you that, the king said, walking down the steps from his throne. But spirit without power is useless. Your pathetic little ship was destroyed by one of our smallest vessels. Your entire species could not stand against a single Zethkari battle fleet. You might be surprised, Sarah said calmly. The king stopped walking. What did you say? I said you might be surprised, Your Majesty. You see one small scouting ship and think you understand humanity. You capture 4 soldiers and believe you have defeated our entire species. But you don't know what you're really dealing with. Webb, Torres, and Morrison stood straighter beside her. They might be chained and facing death, but they were still soldiers of Earth. Enlighten me, then, King Vashatar said with cruel amusement. Tell me about this great human power that I should fear. Sarah looked directly into his yellow eyes. We don't conquer for pleasure. We don't enslave other species for entertainment. We prefer peace, but we are very, very good at war. And we never abandon our people. Empty words from a defeated enemy, the king said. Your government doesn't even know you're here. Your fleet is light years away. You have no power, no allies, no hope. Don't we? Sarah asked softly. Something in her tone made the king pause. Around the arena, the crowd leaned forward, sensing that something important was happening. You see, Your Majesty, Sarah continued, you made several mistakes. First, you assumed we were alone. Second, you assumed our little ship was all we had. Third, and most importantly, you assumed we would not be missed. King Vashatar's eyes narrowed. What are you saying? I'm saying that right now, somewhere out there, very angry humans are looking for us. And when they find us, they're going to want to have a long conversation with you about how prisoners of war should be treated. The king laughed, but it sounded forced. Even if that were true, what could your primitive species do against the might of the Zethkari Empire? We have conquered 17 star systems. Our fleet has never been defeated. Sarah smiled, and it was not a nice smile. Your Majesty, you've been fighting other prey species for so long you've forgotten what real predators look like. Enough, the king roared. You will watch your tongue or I will cut it out. Will you? Sarah asked calmly. Because that would be assault on a prisoner of war. Under Terran military code, that would authorize certain responses. What code? What responses? The king demanded. Sarah's smile grew wider. Article 7, Your Majesty. You really should learn about it. The king stared at her for a long moment. Around the arena, The crowd waited in complete silence. Even the guards seemed nervous. There was something about the human captain's confidence that was unsettling. "You think your words can frighten me?" King Vashatar finally said. "You are nothing but meat waiting to die." "Maybe," Sarah agreed. "But if I die here, you should know that you'll have made a very powerful enemy. Humans don't forgive those who murder their people. We don't forget those who torture prisoners. And we never ever stop hunting those who cross the line." "What line?" the king asked. Sarah looked around the arena at all the conquered species watching from the seats. She saw fear in their eyes, but also something else, hope. They wanted someone to stand up to the Zethkari. They wanted someone to say what she was saying. "The line between civilization and barbarism," Sarah said clearly. "The line between justice and cruelty. The line between those who protect the innocent and those who prey on them." King Vashatar's face twisted with rage. "You dare lecture me about civilization? You primitive beast! I will show you what happens to those who insult the eternal king." He began walking towards Sarah, his massive claws extended. Around the arena, the crowd held its breath. The human captain had gone too far. Now they would see her die. But Sarah just stood there, calm and unafraid. She watched the king approach and spoke one more time, her voice carrying clearly across the silent arena. "Your Majesty doesn't understand what humanity truly is. You've captured 4 soldiers. You haven't captured our spirit, our will, or our capability for justice." The king stopped just in front of her, towering over the small human. "Those are brave words for someone about to die." Sarah looked up at him without fear. "Death doesn't scare me, Your Majesty, but you should be very, very afraid of what comes after." King Vashtar stared down at Captain Sarah Chen, his yellow eyes burning with fury. Around them, the great amphitheater was so quiet that even the smallest sound seemed loud. 1,000,000 alien beings watched and waited to see what would happen next. The king's massive clawed hand moved to the weapon at his side. It was a ceremonial war staff, made of black metal and covered in ancient Zethkari writing. The weapon was as tall as a human, and had been used by Zethkari kings for over 1,000 years. It was a symbol of absolute power and dominance. "You speak of lines that should not be crossed," the king said, his voice low and dangerous. "Let me show you what happens when insects try to lecture their betters." Sarah remained perfectly still, her eyes locked on his. She showed no fear, no weakness, no sign that she would break. This only made the king angrier. "Look at her," he called out to the crowd, his voice echoing across the arena. "See how the primitive creature pretends to be brave? Watch as I show you what human courage is truly worth." The king lifted his war staff high above his head. The black metal gleamed in the arena lights. Ancient symbols carved into its surface seemed to glow with their own dark light. This weapon had been used to execute thousands of enemies over the centuries. In the crowd, aliens from dozens of species watched in horror. They remembered when their own leaders had faced Zethkari justice. They knew what was about to happen, and they could do nothing to stop it. But Sarah just smiled. It was a small, calm smile that seemed completely out of place in this moment of terror. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she said quietly. King Vashatar paused, confused. "Thank you? For what?" "For showing the galaxy exactly what you are," Sarah replied. "For proving that the Zethkari are not the civilized rulers you pretend to be, but nothing more than bullies who hurt prisoners." The king's rage exploded. With a roar that shook the entire arena, he brought his war staff down on Sarah's head. The blow was powerful enough to crush bone, delivered with all the strength of a creature that weighed over 400 pounds. Sarah's head snapped to the side. Blood flowed from a deep cut on her forehead and ran down her face. The force of the blow drove her to her knees, her chains rattling as she fell. The crowd gasped. Many aliens looked away, unable to watch. Some had tears in their strange alien eyes. They had hoped for just a moment that someone might finally stand up to the Zethkari. Now that hope was being beaten out of the brave human captain. Webb, Torres, and Morrison strained against their chains, desperate to help their captain. But the metal restraints were too strong, designed to hold creatures much more powerful than humans. "Sarah," Morrison shouted, forgetting military protocol. King Vashatar laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Yes, call her name. Cry for your weak leader. Show the galaxy how pathetic humans truly are." But Sarah was not finished. Slowly, painfully, she raised her head. Blood covered half her face, but her eyes were still bright and defiant. When she smiled, her teeth were stained red with her own blood. "Is that the best you can do?" she asked. The king stared at her in shock. Any other being would be broken by now, begging for mercy or unconscious from the pain. But this human was still fighting. "Thank you again, Your Majesty," Sarah continued, her voice strong despite the blood running down her face. "You just gave us legal justification under Terran Military Code Article 7. What is Article 7? The king demanded. Sarah's smile grew wider. Article 7 authorizes unlimited retaliation when enemy forces commit war crimes against prisoners of war. Striking a bound prisoner during interrogation or trial is considered such a crime. The king laughed, but it sounded nervous now. "Your human laws mean nothing here. This is Zethkari space. You're wrong," Sarah said softly. "Human law follows humans wherever they go, and Article 7 doesn't just apply to the immediate area. It applies to the entire hostile force and all its command structure." Something cold touched the king's heart. There was something about the human's confidence that was deeply unsettling. She was beaten and bloody, chained and helpless, yet she spoke like someone who held all the power. "You're bluffing," he said. "Your species is primitive. You have no real military power." Webb spoke up from his chains. "Your Majesty, may I ask how long you've been monitoring human space?" The king glared at him. "Since your pathetic species first left its dirtball planet, we have watched your clumsy attempts at spaceflight with amusement." "And what have you seen?" Torres asked. "Small ships, basic weapons, primitive technology," the king replied. "Nothing that could threaten a Zethkari patrol vessel, let alone our empire." Morrison began to laugh. It started as a quiet chuckle but grew louder. Soon all four humans were laughing, even Sarah with blood still dripping from her wound. "What is so amusing?" King Vashatar demanded. Sarah wiped blood from her eyes and looked up at him. "You've been watching our civilian ships, Your Majesty. Exploration vessels, cargo haulers, research stations. Did you really think that's all we have?" The king felt the first real touch of fear. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've never seen a human warship," Sarah said calmly. "You've never seen what we're capable of when someone threatens our people. You've been watching sheep and thinking there were no wolves." Webb nodded toward his wrist where what looked like a simple translation device was attached. "Captain, should I send the message?" Sarah looked around the arena one more time. She saw the conquered aliens in the crowd, desperate for someone to free them from Zethkari rule. She saw the guards, confident in their power but starting to look uncertain. She saw King Vashatar, the eternal ruler who had never faced a real challenge. "Your Majesty," she said formally, "you have struck a prisoner of war during a public trial. This act has been witnessed by representatives of dozens of species and broadcast across the galaxy. Under the laws of war recognized by all civilized peoples, you have committed a crime that demands justice. I am the law here." The king roared. "Not anymore," Sarah replied. She nodded to Webb. "Send it." Webb pressed a small button on his device and spoke clearly. "Guardian Angel, this is Package 4. Article 7 is now active." "Repeat, Article 7 is active. Authorization, Chen 77 Alpha." The device beeped softly, confirming the message had been sent. The signal traveled faster than light through hyperspace communications networks, reaching its destination almost instantly. King Vashatar stared at the small device. "What did you just do?" Sarah's bloody smile was the most frightening thing he had ever seen. "I just told my government that the Zethkari Empire has committed war crimes against human prisoners. I told them that you personally struck a bound prisoner during a public trial. And I told them that Article 7 protocols are now in effect." "What does that mean?" the king whispered. "It means," Sarah said softly, "that you have exactly 5 seconds to live." The arena fell completely silent. Even the king's guard stopped moving, sensing that something terrible was about to happen. 5, Sarah counted down. "You're insane," the king said, but his voice shook. 4. Somewhere in space, engines that could destroy planets began to move. 3. Weapons that could crack moons started to charge. 2. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment prepared to act. 1. King. Vashtar opened his mouth to speak. He never got the chance. Admiral Rebecca Harrison stood on the bridge of the human dreadnought Retribution, watching the main screen with cold eyes. The ship was massive, over 2 miles long and bristling with weapons that the galaxy had never seen before. Around it, 29 other human warships waited in hyperspace, their crews ready for war. "Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Park called from the communication station. "We have the signal. Article 7 is active. Authorization confirmed, Chen 77 Alpha." Rebecca closed her eyes for a moment. Sarah Chen was her friend, a good officer and a better person. The thought of her being tortured by alien monsters made Rebecca's blood burn with rage. "All ships, this is Admiral Harrison," she announced on the fleet communication channel. "Operation Hammerfall is now active. We have confirmation that Captain Chen and her crew are being held prisoner on Dominion Prime. War crimes have been committed against our people." She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew. These were the best and brightest of humanity, trained for this exact moment. They had practiced this operation hundreds of times, waiting for the day when someone would be foolish enough to harm human prisoners. "Rules of engagement are simple," Rebecca continued. "Total elimination of hostile military forces. Complete destruction of command structure. Capture or elimination of all individuals responsible for war crimes. Protection of civilians and non-combatant species. We are not conquerors today. We are the sword of justice. Aye, Admiral," came the reply from 30 ships and 30,000 crew members. Rebecca looked at her tactical officer. "Commander Zhang, take us in." In the great amphitheater on Dominion Prime, Sarah Chen finished her countdown. 1. The air above the arena suddenly shimmered like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist. Then, with no sound at all, a figure appeared behind King Vashitar. Master Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez materialized like a ghost, his advanced stealth suit making him nearly invisible until the moment he chose to act. In his hand was a monomolecular blade, a weapon so sharp it could cut through molecular bonds themselves. The king started to turn, some ancient survival instinct warning him of danger. But humans had been perfecting the art of war for thousands of years, and Rodriguez was the best of the best. The blade moved in a perfect arc, faster than the eye could follow. King Vashitar's head separated from his shoulders so cleanly that for a moment it seemed like nothing had happened. Then the massive body collapsed and the head rolled across the arena floor. The crowd erupted into chaos. Aliens screamed and tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The Zethkari guards raised their weapons, looking for targets, but Rodriguez had already vanished again. More figures began appearing throughout the arena. Human Marines materialized from thin air, their advanced technology allowing them to teleport directly into enemy positions. Each one moved with deadly precision, their weapons humming with lethal energy. "All Zethkari forces, lay down your weapons." A voice boomed across the amphitheater. It came from speakers that hadn't existed moments before, as human technology took control of the alien communication systems. "This is Admiral Rebecca Harrison of the Terran Defense Force. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now and you will be treated according to the laws of war." Above the planet, 30 human warships dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously. They appeared like avenging angels, their hulls gleaming with armor that made Zethkari weapons useless. Each ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, built for one purpose: to project power across the galaxy. The Zethkari orbital defense stations opened fire immediately. Massive energy beams that could destroy mountains struck the human fleet. The beams simply bounced off energy shields that absorbed the impact and converted it into power for the human weapons. "Admiral, enemy stations are firing," reported Commander Zhang. "Show them what real weapons look like," Rebecca ordered. The Retribution fired a single shot from its main gun. The plasma beam was so powerful it lit up space like a new star. When the light faded, one of the Zethkari defense stations was gone, completely vaporized. "This is Admiral Harrison to all Zethkari forces." Rebecca broadcast on all frequencies. "Your king is dead. Your defenses are useless. Surrender now or face complete annihilation." On the surface in the amphitheater, human Marines had secured the area. The Zethkari guards were either dead or had thrown down their weapons. The alien crowd cowered in their seats, not knowing what would happen next. Master Sergeant Rodriguez appeared beside Sarah Chen, his stealth suit deactivating to show a tall, scarred man with kind eyes. He quickly cut through her chains with his molecular blade. "Sorry we're late, Captain," he said with a slight smile. Sarah wiped blood from her face and looked around at the chaos in the arena. "Actually, Sergeant, your timing was perfect." Rodriguez helped her to her feet, then moved to free Webb, Torres, and Morrison. As soon as they were unrestrained, Morrison grabbed a communicator from a dead guard. "All human forces, this is Private Morrison. The prisoners are secure. Captain Chen is wounded but mobile." "Acknowledged, Morrison," came Admiral Harrison's voice. "Medical team is en route." "Captain Chen, are you able to address the crowd?" Sarah looked around the amphitheater. Thousands of aliens from dozens of species stared at her with a mixture of fear and hope. These beings had been enslaved by the Zethkari for generations. They needed to know that humanity was not here to become their new masters. "I'm fine, Admiral," Sarah replied. "Give me a moment to speak to our audience." She walked to the center of the arena, stepping over the body of King Vashitar. Blood still ran down her face from the blow he had given her, but she stood tall and proud. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the silent amphitheater. "People of the galaxy," she began, "my name is Captain Sarah Chen of Earth. I stand before you not as a conqueror, but as someone who believes in justice." The crowd leaned forward, hanging on every word. "Today you witnessed the death of a tyrant. King Vashitar struck a prisoner of war in front of the entire galaxy. Under the laws of civilized beings everywhere, this was a crime that demanded swift justice." Sarah gestured to the human Marines positioned around the arena. "These soldiers came here for one reason: to rescue their captured comrades and punish those responsible for war crimes. We did not come to conquer your worlds or enslave your peoples." A blue-skinned alien in the crowd stood up nervously. "What will you do with us?" he asked in accented Standard Galactic. Sarah smiled, and despite the blood on her face, it was a warm and reassuring smile. "We will do nothing with you. You are free beings with the right to choose your own destiny. The Zethkari Empire is finished, but we have no desire to replace it with a human empire." More aliens began to stand, hope growing in their alien faces. "But we will make this promise," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. "We will not allow any species to enslave or oppress another. We will not permit war crimes against prisoners or civilians, and we will protect those who cannot protect themselves." The crowd began to cheer, a sound that started small but grew louder and louder. Different species made different sounds, roars, chirps. Musical tones gone, but they all expressed the same emotion: joy. "Admiral Harrison," Sarah said into her communicator, "I recommend we establish a temporary administration to help these species transition to self-rule. They'll need time to organize their own governments." "Agreed, Captain," came the reply. "I'm also dispatching humanitarian aid ships. These people have been oppressed for too long." Sarah nodded, then addressed the crowd one final time. "The age of the Zethkari is over. The age of freedom begins now, and humanity will stand guard to make sure no one takes that freedom away again." As medical teams arrived to treat her wounds, Sarah looked around the arena one more time. 5 minutes ago, she had been a prisoner facing execution. Now she stood in the ruins of an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years. The message was clear to every species watching the broadcast: humanity was not to be underestimated. They preferred peace, but they were very, very good at war, and they never abandoned their own. 6 hours after King Vashitar's head hit the arena floor, the Zethkari Empire ceased to exist. Admiral Rebecca Harrison stood in the command center that had once belonged to the Zethkari High Command. Through the massive windows, she could see human ships patrolling the skies above Dominion Prime. The planet's defense grid was completely destroyed, and every military installation had been reduced to rubble. "Final casualty report." "Admiral," Commander Zhang said as he approached with a datapad. Rebecca took the report and read it quickly. 4 human wounded, none seriously. Estimated Zethkari military losses. Complete elimination of command structure and 97% of combat forces. Civilian casualties, 0. She nodded, satisfied. The operation had gone exactly as planned. When humans went to war, they did it with surgical precision and overwhelming force. "What about the other Zethkari worlds?" she asked. 16 systems have surrendered without resistance, Zhang replied. The local populations are actually celebrating. Apparently most of them were conquered peoples who hated their Zethkari overlords. Rebecca wasn't surprised. Empires built on oppression always collapsed quickly when their military strength was broken. The Zethkari had ruled through fear, and once that fear was gone, their empire crumbled like sand. Captain Sarah Chen entered the command center, her head bandaged but her step firm. The medical team had healed her wounds with advanced human medicine. leaving only a small scar as a reminder of King Vashatar's last mistake. "Admiral," Sarah saluted crisply. "Captain," Rebecca replied, returning the salute. "Good work out there. Your message gave us the legal justification we needed to end this empire permanently." "What's the situation across the galaxy?" Sarah asked. Rebecca activated a holographic display that showed the local star systems. Green lights indicated human-controlled areas. Blue lights showed neutral territories, and red lights marked potential threats. Where the Zethkari Empire used to be, there were now dozens of small blue lights. "Every former Zethkari world has declared independence," Rebecca explained. "Most are asking for human protection while they set up their own governments. A few want to join the Terran Federation as associate members." Sarah studied the display. "Any word from other major powers?" "Plenty," Rebecca said with a slight smile. "The Andromedan Council sent a message congratulating us on our measured response to criminal aggression. The Crystal Collective is requesting formal diplomatic relations. Even the Void Hunters are asking for a non-aggression pact." "They're scared," Sarah observed. "Terrified," Rebecca agreed. For the first time in galactic history, a major empire was completely destroyed in less than 6 hours. They're all wondering if they might be next. Webb, Torres, and Morrison joined them in the command center. They had all been checked by medical teams and cleared for duty, though Morrison still looked a bit shaken by their recent experience. "Captain," Webb said, "the intelligence teams have been analyzing Zethkari military records. You were right about them only seeing our civilian ships. They had no idea what our actual military capabilities were." Torres nodded. "According to their files, they thought our most advanced warship was a cargo hauler. They literally didn't know that ships like the Retribution existed." Rebecca laughed. "That's what happens when you spy on a species but only look at what they want you to see. Humans have always been good at hiding our true strength." A communication alert sounded, and the holographic display changed to show an incoming message. The face that appeared was that of Chancellor Vex Thule, leader of the Galactic Council. He was a tall, thin alien with gray skin and large black eyes that showed obvious nervousness. "Admiral Harrison," the Chancellor said, "the Galactic Council congratulates humanity on its swift victory over the Zethkari Empire. We would like to formally invite Earth to join the Council as a permanent member." Rebecca exchanged glances with Sarah. The Galactic Council had rejected humanity's application for membership just 5 years ago, saying they were too primitive and aggressive to participate in galactic politics. "That's very kind, Chancellor," Rebecca replied diplomatically. "We'll certainly consider the Council's invitation. But first, we need to make sure the former Zethkari territories are stable and secure." "Of course, Admiral. Please know that the Council fully supports humanity's administrative role in the transition process." After the communication ended, Sarah shook her head in amazement. "Yesterday we were primitive mammals. Today we're permanent council members. That's what happens when you can destroy an empire in one afternoon," Morrison said, still sounding awed by the experience. Rebecca pulled up another display, this one showing news broadcasts from across the galaxy. The destruction of the Zethkari Empire was the biggest story in galactic history. Every species was trying to understand what it meant for the balance of power. "Look at this," she said, pointing to one broadcast. "The Rigelian News Network is calling us the sleeping giant that woke up. The Centauri Broadcasting Corporation says we're the new guardians of galactic peace." Sarah watched one of the broadcasts showing footage from the amphitheater. The moment when King Vashatar struck her was being shown over and over again, followed by the instant appearance of human marines and the king's swift execution. "They keep showing the 5-second countdown," she observed. "That's already becoming famous across the galaxy." "Good," Rebecca said firmly. "Let every would-be tyrant see what happens when you harm human prisoners. Let them understand that we don't make idle threats." A new alert chimed, and Lieutenant Commander Park looked up from his station. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 different pirate fleets, 12 slaver organizations, and something called the Torture Worlds Confederation." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Torture Worlds? Apparently they're a group of planets that made money by entertaining tourists with the suffering of prisoners," Park explained, his voice disgusted. "Add them to the target list," Rebecca ordered. "Anyone who profits from torture needs to find a new line of work." Sarah looked around the command center at her fellow humans, then at the displays showing the liberated alien worlds. "Admiral, I have a request." "Go ahead, Captain." I'd like to command the humanitarian mission to the former slave worlds. These people have been oppressed for generations. They need help learning how to be free again." Rebecca smiled. "I thought you might ask for that. Consider yourself appointed as Special Envoy for Liberation Affairs. You'll have a full diplomatic staff and a squadron of ships." "Thank you, Admiral." As they spoke, another broadcast caught their attention. This one showed aliens from the former Zethkari territories, holding celebrations in their streets. Children who had never known freedom played games under open skies. Adults who had lived their entire lives in fear were smiling for the first time. "This is why we do it," Sarah said softly. "Not for conquest or glory, but for moments like this." Rebecca nodded. "The galaxy is going to be a very different place now. No more empires built on oppression, no more species enslaved for entertainment, and definitely no more torture of prisoners." Webb looked at the tactical display showing human fleet positions. "Do you think other species will test us? See if we're as strong as we appear?" "Probably," Rebecca replied. "But that's fine. We proved today that humanity keeps its promises. We said we would protect the innocent and punish war criminals. We did exactly that." Torres gestured toward the broadcast showing grateful aliens celebrating their freedom. "Look at their faces. They believe in us now. They trust us to keep them safe." "Then we'd better make sure we're worthy of that trust," Sarah said. As the day ended on Dominion Prime, messages continued pouring in from across the galaxy. Some were from governments offering alliances, others from oppressed peoples begging for help. But the message that mattered most came from Earth itself. President Martinez appeared on the communication screen, her face showing pride mixed with concern. "Admiral Harrison, Captain Chen, on behalf of Earth and all humanity, I want to thank you for your service. You've shown the galaxy that humans keep their word and protect those who cannot protect themselves." "Just doing our job, Madam President," Rebecca replied. "I know, but your job just got a lot bigger. The galaxy is looking to humanity for leadership now. Are we ready for that responsibility?" Sarah and Rebecca exchanged looks. They had been soldiers, explorers, and protectors. Now they were being asked to become guardians of galactic peace. "We'll do our best, Madam President," Sarah said. "We'll help where we're needed, fight when we must, and always remember that with great power comes great responsibility." The President smiled. "I couldn't have said it better myself. Make us proud out there." As the communication ended, Sarah looked out the window at the liberated city below. Aliens who had cowered in fear just hours ago were now walking freely in the streets. Children played games while their parents watched with tears of joy. "Think the galaxy will be better now?" Morrison asked. Sarah smiled, remembering the words she had spoken in the arena. "The age of the Zethkari is over. The age of freedom begins now, and humanity will stand guard to make sure no one takes that freedom away again." The galaxy had learned an important lesson that day. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated or threatened.